Murder Weekly now has merch. Find shirts, mugs, and more with the Murder Weekly logo for sale at our merch store. There's free shipping and 10% off now with the coupon NEWMERCH10. Did we mention there's free shipping? Check out all the goods at calaroga.com, that's CALOROGA.com, or just look for the link in the show notes. Thanks for supporting the show. We really appreciate it.
Calaroga Shark Media. Hello and welcome to Murder Weekly. This episode is titled Mystery in Paradise.
The warm Hawaiian sun glistened off Detective Kane Akuna's bronzed skin as he strode across the golden Waikiki beach. A crowd of startled tourists parted before him, whispering among themselves about the crimson-stained sand up ahead. Kane's eyes locked onto the victim, a pale, lifeless body lying face down along the shoreline. He recognized the bright Hawaiian shirt and khaki shorts anywhere. James Palmer, the brash tech billionaire who had arrived from Silicon Valley just days before. "What do we have, Evan?" Kane asked his partner, Detective Evan Mahelona, who was already securing the scene. Evan looked up grimly. "Meet James Palmer, wealthy entrepreneur from California. Caretaker found him like this early this morning." Kane knelt down, gently rolling Palmer's body to examine the fatal wound, a single gunshot to the back. He scanned the area, eyes narrowing as he spotted a glint of metal in the sand nearby, a 9mm shell casing. "Any witnesses?" he asked, though he already knew the likelihood was low on this semi-secluded section of beach. "Not so far," Evan confirmed with a shake of his head. "His hotel suite is our best lead right now. I'll have forensics sweep the area again for any other evidence." Hours later, Kane and Evan entered the palatial oceanfront suite at the exclusive Mauna Kea resort where Palmer had been staying. The air inside was thick with tension and grief. Palmer's wife Lauren sat motionless on the couch, manicured hands trembling. Though still striking for a woman in her 50s, her face was drawn and pale, a ghost of the confident socialite Kane had seen in photos and at charity galas around Honolulu. "Mrs. Palmer," Kane spoke gently, sitting across from her. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I know this is incredibly difficult, but I need to ask you some questions about your husband to try and find his killer." Lauren's eyes flicked up, glassy with unshed tears. "Of course, Detective, anything to help. When was the last time you saw James alive?" Her brow furrowed as she thought back. "Last night around 10 p.m., we had a terrible argument and he stormed out of the suite." Kane made a note, nodding for her to continue. "James wanted to move back to the mainland, to be closer to his businesses in California. He said he was tired of living in my shadow here in Hawaii." Her voice caught with emotion. "I refuse to go. I'm a born and raised islander. My entire life is rooted here. He called me stubborn and I said some awful things in the heat of the moment that I deeply regretted." "What kinds of things, if you don't mind me asking?" A pained look crossed Lauren's face. "I brought up his infidelity, how I knew he'd been seeing another woman behind my back for months. I threatened to leave him and take half of everything we owned." Kane raised an eyebrow but remained silent, letting her confide at her own pace. "You have to understand, Detective," Lauren continued, eyes pleading. "James was my whole world. We'd been together over 25 years, surviving more ups and downs than I can count. Even after catching him with that woman, a part of me still loved him deeply. I just couldn't bear the thought of him taking her and leaving me and this island for good." Kane nodded slowly, sensing the raw hurt and devotion warring within this woman. Crimes of passion were often born of such extreme emotions. "Did your husband have any other enemies?" Evan pressed from nearby. "Someone else who may have wanted him dead besides this other woman he was involved with?" Lauren seemed to consider this for a long moment before her expression shifted. Well, there was a former business partner he had a terrible falling out with recently, a man named Russell Kaimana. Kane's eyes narrowed at the familiar Hawaiian surname. Kaimana, you said? As in the wealthy tech entrepreneur? The very same, Lauren confirmed with a nod. James and Russell co-founded a software startup together years ago, back when they were just a couple dreamers working out of a dingy little office. But when the company went public and made them both millionaires practically overnight, the riches went to Russell's head. He became obsessed with money and status, losing sight of their original mission. Kane made another note as Lauren continued. Things came to a head a few months ago when Russell pushed to take the startup in a new direction that would sacrifice their principles for profit margins. James refused and tried to oust him from the company, but Russell had already amassed enough support from the board to force James out instead. Bad blood between partners can make for a very committed enemy, Evan mused grimly. Kane agreed, having seen his fair share of corporate feuds turn deadly over the years. Is there anyone else we should look into, Mrs. Palmer? Did your husband perhaps arrange to meet up with this other woman he was seeing after your argument? A flicker of hesitation crossed Lauren's eyes before she shook her head firmly. No, I don't believe so. After our fight, James just stormed out, that's all. I didn't see or hear from him again until... She trailed off, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Over the next few days, Kane and Evan's investigation into James Palmer's murder unraveled a sordid web of secrets and lies. Security footage from a beachside club showed Palmer getting into a heated confrontation with a tall, imposing Hawaiian man the night he was killed, identified as none other than Russell Kaimana. According to witnesses, the two men had to be physically pulled apart by bouncers after nearly coming to blows. When brought in for questioning, a seething Kaimana admitted to meeting Palmer with the intention of making one last attempt to reason with his former friend and business partner. He hoped to convince Palmer to rejoin the company under his new vision, but when the proud billionaire refused, things quickly spiraled out of control. That arrogant Howley thought he could just toss me aside like a dead fish after I helped build our empire from nothing, Kaimana raged, pounding his fist on the table. I would have killed him right then and there if not for the club's security. His overpowering fury gave Kane pause, but the tech mogul also had an ironclad alibi for the time of the murder, verified by multiple sources. Kaimana's hatred seemed to burn too hot to conceal such a calculated crime. Meanwhile, phone records revealed Palmer had made several late-night calls and texts in the days leading up to his death, to a local woman named Mahina. When brought in for questioning, she was evasive at first, until security stills of her entering Palmer's hotel suite on the night of the murder were produced. With a sly smile, the beautiful young Hawaiian woman admitted to being Palmer's secret mistress, carrying on a steamy affair for months as the billionaire scorned his wife's attempts to reconnect their struggling marriage. James worshipped me in a way he never did that uptight pisser of a wife, Mahina purred with no trace of shame. He was going to leave her for good, set me up in my own beachside villa to be his kept woman, but I guess the stuck-up bitch decided to put an end to that. When pressed for specifics on her interactions with Palmer the night he died, Mahina's full lips curved into a Cheshire grin. Let's just say, our last time together was extremely passionate. A proper Hawaiian send-off before his bitter Haole wife could drag him back to the mainland. Her salacious admissions and taunting manner raised further suspicions, but like Kaimana, Mahina also had an airtight alibi after leaving Palmer's suite, witnessed by no less than a dozen people over the next few hours. Just when it seemed the case had gone completely cold, the big break came from the most unlikely source, the hotel's elderly pool staff member. Emilio, a weathered Hawaiian local who had worked at the resort for decades, had been making his nightly rounds cleaning the pools and jacuzzis when he spotted a familiar couple arguing near the secluded beach trails around 11 p.m. "I seen that howly billionaire fella and his mean wife going at it bad," Emilio told the detectives in a thick pidgin accent. "She keep yelling and swatting at him like one mad Hawaiian, then he grab her hands and say something real calming like. But then she just lose it, brah, pull one strap bag off her shoulder and swing it at him hard right across the face." Kane and Evan exchanged a look, now realizing this could have been the confrontation that led to the murder. They pressed Emilio for more details. "So what happened next? Did you actually see Mrs. Palmer pull a gun or hear a gunshot?" The old man shook his grizzled head. No. After that Palmer fellow went down from the bag whack, he was pissed like one demon, start chasing his wife down the beach trail toward the water. I lost sight of him then, but figured she ran to get away and he ran after her, you know? So it's possible Mrs. Palmer was simply acting in self-defense if her husband attacked her first? Evan posited. Kane's brow furrowed in thought. Lauren's increasingly erratic behavior and gaps in her story were now starting to make sense. He had the unsettling feeling they had misjudged her from the beginning. Armed with this new eyewitness account, the detectives returned to the Palmer suite with a renewed sense of urgency. This time, Lauren greeted them with puffy eyes and a much more haggard appearance than before. "Mrs. Palmer, we need you to give us the full truth about what happened between you and your husband that night," Kane stated firmly. "Emilio, the pool man, saw you two in a violent confrontation right before his murder." The distraught woman's face crumpled as she pulled her kimono tighter around herself. Finally, after days of holding firm to her story, the dam broke. "You're right. You're absolutely right, Detective. I lied to you, or at least withheld important parts of the truth." She took a shuddering breath before the full confession tumbled out. "After our blow-up fight in the room, I was so angry and hurt that I grabbed my purse and followed James to confront him again down the beach trails. I'd had one too many glasses of wine and I wasn't thinking straight. When I finally caught up to him, I just snapped, taking that purse and smacking him across the face with it as hard as I could." Kane and Evan remained silent, letting the weight of her admission hang in the air. "I was so shocked by my own actions," Lauren went on, tears streaming freely now. "James, he was furious, grabbed me by the wrists and started shaking me, screaming horrible things. That's when I saw the gun sticking out of his waistband." She locked eyes with Kane, anguish and fear etched across her face. "I don't know what came over me in that moment. Years of his infidelity and abuse, all the gaslighting and manipulation, it all just overwhelmed me. I broke free and pulled the gun on him before he could get it himself. I told him to stay back, that I wasn't going to let him hurt me or leave me ever again." The detectives exchanged a somber look, finally seeing the full tragic picture. "He didn't listen," Lauren whispered, face contorted. "Just kept coming at me in a rage, reaching for the gun. And that's when it went off. A single gunshot right through his chest." She looked up at them imploringly. "Oh God, I swear I never intended to kill him. It was self-defense or temporary insanity brought on by all his cruelty. You have to believe me." Kane regarded the broken woman before him with a mixture of pity and sadness. All the evidence now pointed to the same conclusion, a fatal act of desperation born from years of toxic codependency. As the handcuffs were secured on Lauren's trembling wrists, he spoke the solemn words no detective ever wanted to repeat. "Lauren Palmer, you are under arrest for the murder of your husband."
Murder Weekly is a Calaroga Shark Media production, written and hosted by Aidan I. Flanagan, produced by Mark Francis, executive producers Mark Francis and John McDermott. Portions of this podcast may have been created with the assistance of AI.
This show, along with hundreds of others from Calaroga Shark Media, is available commercial-free on any player, hassle-free. Just look for the link in the episode or show notes.
Calaroga Shark Media.